You guys have plenty of personality to overcome any audio issues.
Cool.
So we are recording, and we can pretty much just
Okay, we're recording.
Hot start.
So yeah, we can continue that conversation.
Oh, okay. I never knew that. How? Like, what's the general? What's the word now?
format.
Flow format. Yeah.
There isn't one.
Oh, okay.
I like to keep it nice and open.
Like an open, casual conversation. We sort of take it where we want to go. It's generally crypto focused and focused about things that interest the three of us. Where that goes, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, and then I know we had some beers the other night, and I enjoyed our conversation. So
Yeah, that was good. Some beers would be nice. Was 1 p.m.
Hey, it's 4 o'clock here, so that's.
So
I'd be okay. Yeah.
Where are you currently?
I'm in Maryland, so East Coast.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
So
I've never been in Maryland before.
it's like 3 hours south of New York. So you were pretty close.
Okay, not bad. Not bad.
Yeah.
New York, San Francisco, Vegas, but Vegas doesn't count.
Vegas doesn't count as
Vegas-
anywhere.
Vegas isn't a real city. It's a
Vegas
magical place. Right. It really could. There's a New York in Vegas. There's an Egypt in Vegas. There's a Wild Wild West. Vegas.
So to kick off the crypto-focused discussion,
Sure.
I'm actually curious. So I know you were trying to be a medical doctor.
Yeah.
How did you? What was the first crypto you bought?
I mean, I think it was Bitcoin. I think for everybody, usually the first thing you buy is Bitcoin.
Okay.
So for me, it was Bitcoin, and I actually bought my first Bitcoin quite late. And it was a function of the fact that there weren't that many tools or like many websites where you could go buy Bitcoin. And so the only option at the time in Nigeria was me to use local Bitcoins.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't quite trust it.
Did you ever use local Bitcoins?
I've never used local Bitcoins before. But I know lots of people that use local Bitcoins, but I've never used local Bitcoins. I understand how it works, but
Sure.
in fact, my first investment in crypto was to basically invest in a company that created a much nicer interface to buy Bitcoin fiat in Nigeria. But yeah, so my first thing was Bitcoin, then Ethereum, and I remember then like just seeing a bunch of tickers, not necessarily knowing what they were, and the price was going up, so I was just like buying it. And sometimes like when I want to make myself laugh, like I go back to some spreadsheets I had of like a bunch of these things now.
Yeah, no, I love doing those because you can do like financial projections. You're like, if this continues to grow at 95% a month,
then
we're gonna
be I'm rich.
Yeah.
But yes, I think like for me, I actually got into crypto from a trading perspective.
Were you a trader ever?
I never traded anything in my life, but I mean, I saw like the price of things were going up. There was a lot of information on Twitter. Like if you actually check my Twitter right now, I have a bunch of lists of like crypto traders that I used to follow and look for like tips and things like that. Then over time, I read more about like technical analysis, started using that to trade. Then I realized that actually sometimes I'm right. Like, I get into the right position, but because I'm asleep, the market has moved against my position. So I decided to write very basic automated trading strategies. And then I think, from sort of like just spending time trading, I was like, actually, like, there has to be something more than just sort of trading. Like, why do people care about this technology? And that was where the whole deep dive into crypto started. So yeah, I went from sort of trading to more understanding technology and then sort of investing in it.
So take me,
Can I jump in real quick?
Yeah.
Well, I just had a question about what you said earlier, which was you were in medical school. Is that what I heard?
Yeah.
So was this all happening while you were in medical school?
No, definitely not. I should definitely give you guys some timelines, right? So, I grew up in Nigeria, Lagos, Nigeria, but I left Nigeria when I was 14. So I went to the UK, did A levels. I don't know if you guys know what A levels is, but it's like pre-university. So everyone in the UK does it for 2
Oh, it's
years.
like AP classes or something.
Yeah, something like that. And then I went straight into medical school. But medical school for just over 3 years. Then like all my friends knew I was always like, I'm not going to practice medicine. Like, it's super boring. You could pretty much predict what your life was going to look like 20, 30 years because like not much changes in medicine. But I didn't know what I wanted to do. Like as an African kid, if you're someone that's doing well in school, you're limited to medicine, engineering, architecture, law. And law was boring as hell to me. Architecture, I couldn't draw straight lines, so I gave up on a career in that. Engineering, I had a very bad physics teacher. And medicine was sort of like the only one that two brothers.
The only one left.
The only one left. But like I think once I discovered technology entrepreneurship, and sort of like the whole sort of startup tech industry, I was like, this seems a lot more interesting. So I dropped out of medical school, started a company, and
What was that company?
it was a social app.
A social app?
It was a social app. I thought I was going to be the app that Zuckerberg. It didn't work out. I always joke with founders that like I probably made every mistake you can make in the book.
Did you get an investor?
I got investments actually. Yeah.
Really?
I got like maybe like
everybody else thought you were going to be the Zuckerberg too.
I mean, I think they just did it because like they just Yele is interesting. Let's support. Let's see what it does with this.
Sure.
So funny enough, right? Something I told all of my investors, I said I gave them some carry from my fund later on. So I was like, you guys believed in me when.
So you actually still keep in contact with them?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
A lot of them are friends, a lot of them are family, and I'm always like, man, like investing is hard, right? But at least you guys can have some upside in some of the things I've done later on. So this was probably around like 2013. At this point, like that was the first time I heard about crypto. So I had a friend whose dad bought her Bitcoin, like maybe in 2012. And she was talking about how like the price was like gone up, and I was like, this is interesting. But I remember going on Coinbase and thinking that like, wow, like I love the design of this website. So I did took screenshots of Coinbase 2013, but I never thought, oh, let me buy Bitcoin, right? And that was it until like early 2017.
Wow. And you were just doing tech startups.
And until then I was still in tech. That shut down that company a year in. Myself and a couple of friends had a product studio where we were building like apps and websites for like non-technical people that had ideas.
You were those Nigerians that emailed me asking if I needed build.
Funny enough, like the price point, like if you find a very good Nigerian dev, you're gonna get sort of like very high quality for very low price. I mean, there's $1 billion company.
Yeah.
Andela that is basically built off that premise, right? So Andela basically connects US companies to African devs who sort of like develop,
No, I think all of those like standard tasks are gonna go after. Just like if you like building a website, if you give them a design, like it's pretty standard what needs to be done. Like why would you pay a developer here $80 an hour when you can pay them $80 a week?
And I mean like it's developers, designers, product managers. There's a very strong technical scene now, and that's sort of like what made me transition towards investing. But I moved back to Nigeria in 2015, and at this point, there were lots of people who were interested in starting tech companies. So I helped start a company that was an online platform and an online community and resource platform for African entrepreneurs. We scaled that to about 28,000 entrepreneurs from across Africa in about 30 plus countries. So we're doing like events, webinars, and then also connecting startups to investors. And that was when Michael Sibu was visiting Nigeria, and he was like, Yele, you guys should think about doing a fund. You guys should do a fund. And that's sort of the origin story behind sort of like microtraction. So I started microtraction. I was investing, and microtraction is still ongoing. We backed about 9 companies at microtraction and 3 companies before microtraction. A lot of them have come to the US, raise capital.
Do you find it easier? Do you think it's easier to be a VC in Africa than in the US?
I mean, it depends on what you mean by.
Well, because like, so from my perspective, like there might be, say, more tech talent or people with experience here. But at the same time, you can probably give them a lot less and give more in over there.
Yeah, so I think there definitely is like less competition. So for instance, for the demo day or bidless day, we have about 300 plus VCs who are gonna come, or for the program. Like, it's very hard to put together 50 investors that have like in a single market. So let's say Nigeria, Kenya, or South Africa, 50 investors that have written a 15K check in the last 12 months, right? So there are just less investors. So if you're an investor who's like really hungry, understands tech, can get on with founders being very founder friendly, then like entrepreneurs want to work with you. So from that point of view, I would say it's like, there definitely is like, it's like a blue ocean, right? There's less competition. But it's still challenging because at least in the US or other developed markets, you can point to a bunch of exits, you can point to successful companies, and this sort of creates belief in the ecosystem. Whilst in Africa, the wealthiest people are not investing in technology.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I've always wondered that, like with the African companies too, like in sort of adopting kind of the tech stack here in the US, like a lot of these apps and stuff too. Do you think the African population is going to almost have their own set of like products that are more specifically tailored and from African companies?
Yeah. So I think like dev tools, probably not.
Sure.
Dev tools like backend infrastructure. But then like, for the actual products themselves, then definitely, right? So the best example, and sort of like to bring it back into crypto, is like Coinbase and let's say Bitcoins, right? So the tech infrastructure is probably the same, but the product has been localized for that.
Well, I mean, you see it too in like Asia, like Asia's biggest social media apps and everything like that are all very different than the US.
Yeah. Funny enough, though, you don't have the same sort of clear differences. So like I mean, maybe it's because of the way the Asian technology ecosystem developed, when they're like how China has like their own search engine or their own e-commerce marketplace. In Africa, the search engine is Google.
Well, I wonder how much of that too is like the Chinese government.
Yeah, it's probably
for sure.
It's more sort of like protectionist, right?
Isolationist almost. They want to have their own version of Xbox, their own version of Google, their own version of Amazon.
Yeah. Which sometimes, like, I think it's like, it has pros and cons depending on sort of like
would you recommend African companies do that, or African countries in general?
Oh man, like this is, I don't even know if I want to go down this.
Let's go. No,
I don't even want to go down this. It's tough, right? I think
take us down the rabbit hole.
It depends on how you're thinking about it, right? So one of the biggest concerns is like you have like Alibaba, Tencent, all these companies. They're like billion-dollar companies, but at least they're in the Chinese economy, and they can sort of bring value to that particular economy, right? When you don't have like really large companies, you don't have like tech companies, because you have the Googles and the Facebooks pretty much dominating the market. It does mean that you wouldn't have the big or the large tech company of a particular size solving the same problems. But then I'm a big believer in free markets, right? Like I think yes, it would be nice to have like an African Google or like an African Facebook or whatever. But the truth is, right now we don't have that many engineers or that many people in tech to support sort of like these very large companies. And do I want us to sort of like have products that are not as good as what the rest of the world has just because of the sake of protectionism? The answer is no, right? But then you then have to sort of like think and say, okay, what else exists? What are the other opportunities that you can sort of build very interesting things on? And this is actually why, one of the reasons why I got into crypto, right? Like I genuinely believe that the market structure and dynamics of the African continent is sort of like a very native, fundamentally is very sort of like a good place to actually build a lot of things with blockchain, right? And this creates sort of like very interesting dynamics. So instead of having sort of like closed loop tech ecosystems, you end up having open technology ecosystems where things are interoperable, where the customers own their own data. So for me, I'm like, initially I was, if I was being honest, deep down, maybe I had like a little bit of a protectionist feel before, but I think like mainly I understood sort of like the potential of blockchains and, you know, and sort of like what this could create from an economic perspective. I was like, why don't we figure out how to increase the number of blockchain native developers? Why don't we encourage people to build like decentralized applications? And that sort of like changed things a bit for me.
Yeah, well, I think it's, there's always almost that protectionist argument because, like, you know, especially whenever we started out the conversation talking about companies over here using cheap labor over in Africa, you know, and then like a lot of the, you know, you're over here in San Francisco now, like with companies coming from Nigeria almost to the US to raise money and not even set up here in the US, like. So like, is it like gutting the good talent and leaving almost some of the lower class developers if you don't solve it?
I mean, like, that's always a problem, right? Like when you speak to entrepreneurs and sort of like the founders, everybody complains about the lack of talent and the fact that, you know, talent wants to sort of move away from these ecosystems. And like, it is such a touchy subject, you know, like if you follow like the key opinion leaders on the African tech continent, like almost everybody's talking about developers and developer ecosystem. But for me, I'm like, who am I to tell an individual what to do with their lives, right? Like the whole point of this is like economic freedom. If you believe the best way to spend your time is to work for, you know, a global company or work for another company and then they're going to pay you, then like fine, you know, like so for me, I'm like, I think India has done it quite well in that, like they have so many technical schools, you know, they have so many developers of like different ranges that like no matter how many Indian developers come to the US or leave India, they still have like so many developers.
Right.
And that's the beauty of the internet, right? The internet has reduced the cost of education. Obviously, there are infrastructure challenges like things like access to internet, the cost of access to internet, having a laptop. But all of these things, in my opinion, are things that can be solved. So I spend more time thinking about saying, you know, what Africa has is population. There are 1.2 billion people. Over the next 20 to 30 years, we're going to double that population. And so that means you do have sort of like a huge human capital resource, right? And I believe that talent is evenly distributed, but opportunity is not. And so how can we then connect more of these individuals to the resources they need to sort of upskill themselves? So Asia sort of developed itself using industrial capitalism. So wherein you had like these factories that paid people like, you know, a couple of cents to make like a shirt or whatever. Like I believe very strongly in cognitive capitalism, which is saying how can you teach people digital skills that they can use to either work for the local economy or actually work for the global economy but earn capital directly, right? So an engineer would be earning, let's say, $2,000 a month. But that's way better than if that same engineer was working in some factory earning $40 a month, right?
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah. Or Mike.
Yeah. So connect Africa to me as, how do I say this? So if Africa might not be the sort of ground zero for development or competing with, San Francisco or Hong Kong or these other areas, but can it compete by being sort of the ground zero for the use cases of the technology, and therefore sort of back its way into the developer side of things by being the place where these things have the greatest ability to be used, right? Mm-hmm. And that can excite a whole ecosystem in and of itself.
Yeah. So I think like you're 100% right? Like the way I think about this is a top-down and bottom-up approach, which is saying that right now, maybe the number of like blockchain developers in Africa will be between sort of like, let's say 100 to 150. There might be other people who are learning, but like, could this person come and work for, let's say, Hello or like any other company? Like that number will be like maybe on average 100 to 150, right? And so 150 developers cannot support an ecosystem, right? Now, so the way I think about it is, when I say top down, I mean like, how do we sort of expose global developers, right, to local problems and give them context about sort of like opportunities, because that's how I see it, right? So I think like, most people who get into crypto or into sort of like the blockchain space actually believe in the future of the world that is better than what it currently is. And unfortunately, because of things like regulation, because of sort of like good enough alternatives, because of sort of strong enough incumbents, sort of like disincentives of whatever the status quo is, you don't have much room for experimentation, right? But what if you could create sort of a system where you have globally sourced innovations to local problems? So that's sort of like what I think about it. And the beauty about crypto generally is that it's open source, which means someone in Africa who's interested, who's bought the ideology, can basically go on GitHub, look at the code, and sort of like play around with it, do like a, do a pull request, whatever, GitHub, and sort of begin to contribute, right? Which is very different from, like, an African developer cannot contribute to Facebook or WhatsApp or any of these things, but an African developer can contribute to any global well-known project today, right? So that is sort of like this, the top-down, or will I say the pool, right? And the other way I think about it as well is also sort of like on developer education, right? So myself, Tech, Flora are very focused on sort of, building the developer ecosystem across the world. So we're trying to create resources wherein someone who's interested in blockchain development can get started, and also then work with, whether it's our portfolio projects or some of the fellows that we funded, and to really sort of like bridge these two worlds, right? So the way I see it is like, initially, maybe over the next 2 to 3 years, what would see happening is more sort of like, like global developers building for Africa. Mm-hmm. Maybe like, let's say 80% will be like global for Africa, and like 20% the other way. And you will have like local developers solving things like crypto inclusion. So majority of the projects that we funded today are solving basically accessibility challenges, right? But over time, as people spend more time, as they buy, I think, like, as they buy into the ideology, and you have the resources, they're sort of like very easy pathways, then you will then have more people who go from sort of entry-level junior devs to like more senior devs, because they've proven themselves and they can start building things.
Yeah, well, that's like, I thought about it. It's like an interesting thing in the blockchain space right now is, like if you're say a seasoned blockchain developer, mm-hmm. and you're worth your salt, like you want to just make money, and then that's your goal, like you can probably go get a job at a big company, basically, you know, Fortune 500 company building out their internal blockchain suite, and you're going to make a whole lot of money, but it's going to be, you know, a shit project that you probably don't want to work on. But then, you know, then you have like the next tier, which is like kind of like the American, European crypto companies that pay well, but you still see like they're still not, I mean, they're not Google salaries. They're still much, much lower, and they sort of are trying to rely on the fact that you want to build something that matters. And they want to get you. So, you know, and then even like another thing below would probably be like what an African company can pay those developers. So, you know, like is there almost enough of that, like, you know, like what used to be like libertarian fervor in the system to like make people like really believe in this stuff to fund these developers?
To be honest, like I hope so, right? Like that is a bet on assumption that I'm willing to take and willing to believe. I think like one of the main reasons why I personally joined Binance was because it was quite clear that Binance does care about sort of like Africa, and are willing to put the resources into the continent to make it work, right? You know, we literally funded four companies and deployed more capital into those 4 companies that I deployed throughout my 2-3 years of investing, right? And so for me, that also meant personally that I didn't think about fundraising. I didn't think about, you know, capital formation. I just had to think about allocating capital to the right resources. I think locally, 100%, like the average, sort of, let me use the word technocrat, but the average sort of like African who is in tech has a libertarian worldview. They don't know that they're being libertarian, but like everybody's anti-government. Everybody's anti-government, right? Like and sort of like, you know, if you grew up in an economy wherein you paid for your education, you paid for your healthcare, you pay for your transportation, it's not subsidized. You pay for your own security, you pay for your own infrastructure, like you have people who repair their own roads themselves. Then like what exactly is the government supposed to do? Like what is the government, right? You pay for electricity, you pay for your water.
Self-custody is not a big leap anymore.
So if anything, you have people who are like, you want to change things, right? But you don't know how to change it. Like you're like, you can't. How many people who decide, okay, you know what, I want to go into politics and try and change things from within? What tends to happen is they get corrupted, right? So like the way I think about it and the way most people think about it is like everybody's trying to figure out and say, is there an alternative way to basically organize ourselves at scale so we can actually solve some of these problems with or without government, right? Like, so people have this, they have this wish and this desire, they just don't know how.
But I mean, knowing a little bit of African politics, I mean, there's been several attempts to sort of try and bring Africa together more, you know, and it's like it seems to be very fragmented, almost culturally, even within the continent.
So this is the thing, right? Like, the way I think about it is the young Africans who are sort of digitally connected are more cohesive than like our parents, right? Sure. Like you know, whenever I tell like my uncles, my mom, I'm traveling to like an African country, they're like, why are you doing that? Like, why are you going there? Because it was very, very disconnected. Like they would rather sort of travel to, you know, the US or like the UK or like anywhere else, or like not another African country. And even within, like Nigeria has like 360 languages and 360 tribes. So it's a very fragmented, extremely fragmented sort of like what's the word now? Community from a cultural perspective. But that is more sort of like our parents' generation, right? Now, like we are very internet native. You know, you like the young Nigerian calls Nigeria Nigeria. It's almost like giving America a new name, because we see our world, or like that this group of people very different. Now the big problem is that there's no way to coordinate this energy, right? So for instance, like I was saying this a couple of days ago. I said the last election in Nigeria was won by 15 million votes, right? Right. The last time they did the last election had 50% of the voters were under 35, right? Which means that like today, if the youth were coordinated and decided to back like a specific group of candidates, it could pretty much like we are digitally connected enough to actually sort of make change. But the problem is that like there is no way to coordinate those groups of people. So when I think about it, I'm like, you don't need to sort of like have this huge, massive, you know, community, or like, you know, to use the blockchain word DAO. But like you have smaller ones that decide to create alliances because they know that like you're better off like working together. But sure, there is no way, right? There's no way to sort of achieve that. And if you try to put it like, you know, on traditional tech stack, then you have like the centralization of power. And like power corrupts, right? So, you know, when I share these ideas to people, when I'm back home, like everyone is like, holy fuck. Like that's when they get it. They're like, man, like it's actually possible for us to imagine a future wherein you almost have like a democratic coup, because you have people who are like young, who believe in the future, but, you know, be able to sort of like coordinate ourselves to actually effect economic and political change.
I mean, okay, so staying on this, you know, coups have happened in the past.
Democratic coups.
Democratic coups have happened.
Not a military coup.
No, but you know, like, do you think it's going to happen almost like, especially with Bitcoin world, like, do you think it's going to be more of an economic coup? Do you think it's going to be like almost this revolution where we all start using, like we say, you guys don't have any power?
So I actually think like we are more likely to see, and I don't want to keep using the word coup, but like we're more likely to see an economic revolution than not. And sometimes I don't know if it's Bitcoin, right? Like, but I know that it's going to be some form of this thing. Like I know, I can feel it like very, very intrinsically. Like I keep saying it that before, you couldn't really transact using like another nation's sort of currency, right? You couldn't like, there was no way for you to get enough dollars for me to send it to you, and then you can if you have a dollar account in Nigeria, I can't send dollars to your dollar account in Nigeria. It's not permitted by law, right? And for you to get dollars is super hard. But now I can buy Bitcoin. I can send Bitcoin to you directly. Like since I've been in SF, all of my friends who give me like dollars so I can actually spend locally, all of them take Bitcoin from me. So you have like, you have people actually using sort of like these currencies, right? Obviously because of volatility and things like that, you'll probably need to figure out ways to have non or less volatile forms of these currencies. But I can see, an alternative reality where people are actually using these currencies on a day-to-day basis to like transact without a shadow of doubt. And that's why I'm very big on the idea of like cognitive capitalism. I'm very big on the idea of people actually earning crypto. I started using crypto more often when I started earning it, right? Like it's much easier for you to earn and spend than for me to go buy and use.
Pull off of Coinbase.
It's
that's how I got my first Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Client paid it to me, and that was what. So then I was like, I have these things.
What do I do?
I need to spend. I need to pay rent with them.
Yeah.
And that started it all.
Yeah.
If Bitcoin or this sort of the transaction type of use case for crypto, if that isn't the beachhead that sort of starts the economic revolution, is there another use case other than money that might be a place where, crypto gets anchored into the sort of ecosystem in Africa?
Yeah. So I think like I think like definitely is 100% going to be like, first of all, economic and financial. The way I think about it is like, can you imagine the US or Europe sort of existing without credit, right? Like in Africa today, there's actually no credit. Like you can't get money to do something. And if you look at sort of the growth of economies up until sort of like the where people had like credit systems, you really had depressed economic growth, right? So economic development. So, and I'm not talking about fractional reserve banking. I'm just saying that like, is there a way wherein I can trust you that if I give you my money, you are able and willing to pay me back at, X date and at X interest. Like that is super hard to do today. If you went to Nigeria to rent a house, you have to pay your rent 2 years upfront. Right? If you want to buy a car, that is worse. Like if I bought a new car in Nigeria, I'll probably spend more than if I bought like a Model 3 here. And the car is 100% worse than the Tesla Model 3. Like, so, like that whole infrastructure, in my opinion, just doesn't work. Right? So when I think about it, like, some of the first problems that we need to figure out is number one, some version of decentralized ID, because without sort of like true ID, you can't really build reputation. Without reputation, you can't sort of like give out like credit, right? But if you figure out decentralized ID, that is an identity system that is not owned by the government, right? So like India has an ID system, digital ID system, but it's not decentralized. And it's actually, overall, it's been a net positive, but it has like some issues, right? In Africa, like I'm actually quite scared for the government to roll out the ID systems because, like I said,
take all your information.
Like in February around the election, I think I told you this, around the election period, they actually blocked a huge population's access to both business and individuals access to the funds. Right, and the rationale was that it was for taxes, but like nobody believed that. It was purely because they didn't want the wealthiest people to influence like elections. So giving someone money to vote for a particular candidate, something like that, which I understand. Like that's like fair. Like it's bad for people to sort of influence votes, but the fact that the government can block my access to my money is super scary, right? So this is why like we need sort of like like a decentralized ID system, and a way in which people can move money between each other, but they don't have to worry about the volatility. So for me, like people might not like things like True USD or like Dax or USDC, but in Africa, these are huge innovations, right? Like the alternative for me to hold Naira or whatever currency, and what you depreciate between 12 to 20% per annum, right? And you can't save that money anywhere. So the way I think about it, I'm like, the first use cases will involve sort of like economics and finance, and it will be access to credit. And if that someone will use something, if they know that, oh my God, I use this particular wallet to transact, or I do these transactions on chain, I can have access to credit that is like 8% a year. Right now, if you took out a loan from digital lenders, these are tech companies that are using machine learning algorithms on the right credit risk, you're still going to pay between 15 to 30% per month. Right? So imagine telling someone like
that's prohibitive.
Use this wallet to transact. I'm going to give you a loan of 8%. You're going to use the wallet. So that like credit creates a pool. So if you want to get access to credit or better financial services, use this wallet, and people would use that because it's better than the status. That's number one. Number two is the poorest people who do between sort of like 20 to 50 cents transactions a day cannot use any digital form of payment, because the fees are going to be like 25 cents, right?
Well, this is always the question for me whenever you talk about crypto, like, at what point do you think we're actually going to scale to be able to allow this? You know, like if you're making such a low amount, like, I mean, even Ethereum, even if you consider, you know, multi-cent transaction fees, that's too much.
So you gotta think about it, and like, you know, one of the companies that has this actually actually said, we're trying to figure out that problem, and we've actually sort of like figured out or seen a couple of things that make this work. So number one is like the POA network, which I was super excited about, but then as I read more, I heard that it was actually by permission, that you know, you had sort of like a couple of trusted nodes that if they decided to go rogue, that you lose your assets. But then you also have things like Matic, you have things like Seller, Scale is coming online, and this allows you to do state channels and like micro transactions, but the fees are like very minimal, right? So
there's still such a research area that you know, it's still really, really new.
Yeah, but I mean, like the beauty about this stuff, we have to think about it is like, at the end of the day, is I don't think it's going to be like I believe in this idea of progressive decentralization. Right? Like, I don't think it's going to be like, oh my God, let's take the entire economy's infrastructure and put it on this thing. It's not going to happen. It's going to happen like very, very slowly, right? But the fact is that with this technology, I can send you 50 cents and pay very, very low transaction fees.
Sure.
Right? Which means someone can do 100 naira, 200 naira, 300 naira, very little transaction.
I mean, and that's the other question too, a lot of people have said about like why there's not a whole lot of investment in Africa. It's like, if people don't have a whole lot of money to spend, you really have to almost hit, you know, like viral amounts of people before you can actually make any money out of it.
No, I mean, like telcos, banks, funny enough, like make a ton of money, and that's just because they provide utility, right? Like the way I think of Africa right now is like the US in 1900s, right? Like, and funny enough, for someone who is not a fan of traditional banking and not a fan of governments, I'm a big fan of people like JP Morgan and
get out of here.
Like, no, seriously, like, let me explain where that viewpoint comes from, right? These were individuals who basically forced they had a future of the world that they believed should exist, and they made that happen, and that was just one individual, right? But it's because like there were lots of fundamentals that required a new kind of financial system. So in Africa, there are lots of fundamentals that require a new financial system. There are lots of sort of things that makes the old financial system not sustainable or viable, right? The difference is that rather than it being like one individual who wants to sort of like monopolize an economy and monopolize sort of like wealth creation, we have the opportunity to use blockchain to sort of like create a more inclusive egalitarian system. So when I say something like, oh, like I respect the work that those guys did, but not, I don't believe in, oh, we want to try and create another JP Morgan in Africa. Like, it's more about like the fundamentals are here for you to create a new economic infrastructure and system.
No, I mean, well, that's like, so I've always, I've thought about that too. Like JP Morgan, one of my favorite stories of JP Morgan was in like, it was like the panic of 1907. Mm-hmm. There was a bank run, and he basically, he said like, he's like, I'm going to make good, like, because everyone was withdrawing all their gold from the banks, and he's like, I'm going to stand here and make sure, like, with the door open, it's like, we are the lender of last resort. And he was like, he acted as the de facto Federal Reserve before the Federal Reserve happened, like, whatever, 9 years later. And that's whenever they decided, like, hey guys, maybe we need a lender of last resort. And like, nowadays it would be great.
Was it funny enough, like, the Federal Reserve is not a lender, it just
well, it's a lender of last resort.
There's no bias, like, oh yeah, this is more money. Figure out something later. But like I get where you're coming from, right? Like,
No, but like to set up like nowadays, you would hope that like as they go to set up this lender of last resort in 1960, they would pick the blockchain system and have it be decentralized. But like most of the time, like the people setting it up are the ones who are corrupted enough themselves.
Exactly. And so this is actually this is why, like, to sort of like touch on the second thing that I also think is quite important, which is like this idea of like sort of decentralized governance and like or like governance for cooperatives or commons.
Yeah.
Like one of the reasons why like some of the more political ideologies that I have about blockchain and crypto cannot work in the traditional sense is that if you try and do it with today's technology, the power absolutely corrupts, right? Like power absolutely corrupts. Like, but how do you design a system from the ground up that wherein like you would never, it's impossible for like one individual to then sort of co-opt this entire system like that. And sometimes I talk to one of my smartest friends, and you can see that they still not gotten into this mindset. Like this mindset of like, for them, it's like, why do I want to create value to the world and like make it something that everybody can use and like decentralize this thing and distribute the authority or distribute the governance. Like so a lot of people are still struggling with sort of like this notion. But some people, which I think is not enough, like you need to convince everybody, right? Some people are beginning to understand that like actually this is like the only way we solve this is if we work together collectively. And I think like that was like the biggest mindset shift I had, which was like, man, like one individual, like Africa has 1.2 billion people,
sure,
right? Like one individual, there's no way in hell that one individual or a group of individuals can actually try and change the state of things. So,
I don't know, man.
So the only way, no, seriously, even some of the wealthiest people are also beginning to like have or come around to this kind of like ideology, right? But I don't know. I think sometimes maybe I'm too much of like an idealist.
But this is always like I think the podcast that's actually going to be posted right before yours. I had a great discussion with a guy, and he was talking about democracy, like decentralized voting and things. And it's always the question, like whenever you want to implement these democracies, it's like, do people actually know what's best for them?
Yeah.
Like whenever we're setting up a monetary policy system, like, I've been studying this for years, and I still don't know what the best one is. Mm-hmm. Like, how do you sort of do this?
So the way I think about it, and I had, one of my, I don't even know what I can call this person, but me and her have this kind of debates all the time because we actually have quite opposing views.
Sure.
And like, it's very good to speak to someone that is like very objective and logical, and it's not going to become like a full-blown argument. But like the way I think about this stuff is that like people think about democracy in its current state, which is for you to do an election or like to vote against some like votes. It's almost like semi-permanent. That is like, if you, let's say Brexit, for instance, right? They did this vote. It cost a lot of money to vote, and people were like, "Oh yeah, let's leave the EU." And now it's like this permanent decision, right? when actually people have realized that was the wrong decision, and they would like to. If you did the voting again, they'd probably be like, "Oh my God, we're absolutely wrong. We're very sorry. We don't do this again." So when I think about democracy, I'm like, democracy with blockchain or tech is more liquid, which means it's very similar to how self-driving cars work. That like you have lots of inputs coming in and you're able to sort of like correct as you learn. And like no particular decision is catastrophic because it's like a swarm, right? Like the way a swarm of like birds move, like regardless of what the obstacle is, like they would sort of like just.
Sure.
And that's how I think about democracy today. Democracy is too static. It's like you choose one president and he has to be there for 4 years. But why 4 years? Why not 2 years? Why not 1 year? Why not why does this
or lifetime appointments for Supreme Court justices?
Yeah, why were those things the way they were? And nobody really questions these things, right? Like, so when I think about it, it's not about, even when I'm designing systems or like playing around with economics, like I believe very strongly in upgradability and non-permanent, right? Like you cannot design a full system.
So you're not a Bitcoin maximalist.
I'm definitely a maximalist of any.
Sure.
I'm a blockchain maximalist.
Yeah.
I'm a blockchain maximalist, but I'm not like one like I believe this is the best thing. Like, the problem about maximalism is that like people don't understand that it's actually tied into personal greed. In that, like, if you own a bag of some crypto, you fucking want that thing to be the one that ends up winning. You're sort of blinded intellectually to almost anything else because you're not able to think about it outside of like, man, I own so much of this stuff, I want it to succeed. Right? Like I don't have that worldview. Like I genuinely look at blockchain and crypto from the other side, which is I want to figure out how to create a better an alternative governance and economic system for Africa. Right. And until I achieve that goal, I don't care if it's Bitcoin or Ethereum or Binance Chain or like any freaking blockchain. I couldn't give.
As long as you're improving.
As long as it's improving, as long as it's getting better. And that's why, like, for me, the core idea in crypto to me is this idea of like self-sovereignty. Like let individuals be in control of their own sort of like private property and let them make decisions based on what they think is best. And how, like, once you have sort of like self-sovereign individuals, how do you build sort of coordination tools that allow them make better decisions, that allow them collaborate, that allow them take collective action? And then how do you build the feedback loops, right? Mm-hmm. That allows them course correct when a particular decision has been made.
Yeah, it's almost just so much education, though.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, there are definitely sort of like ideas that I have around that. Things like, some people do not agree, but I believe in sort of like this concept of liquid, delegated democracy, right? So, for instance, and this is a very bad idea, but if there was let's say we're like, oh, we need to decide on what oracles to use. I can read about oracles, but I'm like, man, okay, I trust Nick. I'm gonna delegate whatever books I have to
the Cosmos system,
right? And if I find out that, dude, Nick was terrible, the last couple of decisions was.
You heard it here first.
I'm not gonna use him again, and I'm gonna sort of use someone else.
No,
right?
I like this.
And so for me, like the more I think about it, right, I'm like, you need individuals. Right, and that's why like DID is probably one of my biggest.
I'm just so curious. How is this gonna work?
People. So for me, like, I don't think about it from like, oh, I want to roll this out across Africa. Like, yes, there are thinking about it, like, I would go to universities, I would go to villages, like I would go to small towns, and like let them use these things. Let us learn in the real world. Like, let us actually see how these things work. Why does it not work? Right, like, the problem today is like everybody tries to figure out, everything during the ideation stage, which is it's like I use I think
it's all theory.
It's all theory. I read some blog posts the other day, and I thought like this was fantastic. So I'm thinking about it, and was talking about sort of like flying. Right, most people thought flying was a bad idea. However, some people thought flying was a good idea. But then you had like some experts, PhDs, super well funded, they're like doing a bunch of physics and a bunch of calculation on what the best flying machine could be, never really doing anything. and you had sort of like the what those brothers called? The
Wright brothers.
The Wright brothers, who were just doing sort of like iterate, crawl, walk, run type system.
You and the Leonardo da Vinci's jumping out the windows.
Well, what is the guy who jumped off the Eiffel Tower in 19 something or other?
Exactly.
Fell to his death.
Well, he made the catastrophic error. I don't believe in making decisions. Like, anything, ask yourself and say, am I going to die? Am I going to lose all my money? If any of the answer is yes, like, then you're very, because I mean, like, you should have looked out the window and thought, if I'm wrong, what happens? And if he thought it was going to be wrong, then maybe he should have fucking jumped up, like 1 or 2 feet, as opposed to going to the top of the Eiffel Tower.
Well, I feel like me trying to walk around Africa overthrowing currencies is probably
no. I mean, like, no, but it's not. I don't think it's going to be like the revolution. It's like an evolution. It's an evolution. It's not like, I use the phrase economic evolution. And the beauty is, like, the people in power don't even care. They're not focused on this thing. I believe more in grassroots and just, people buy into this ideology. Like, there's a crazy group of, like it's just latently there. People just want to, what's the word now? People want change, and hopefully we figure it out. Even if we don't, like, I mean, it's fun trying to figure it out.
That's why we're here.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we're coming up on time.
Well, I tell you.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to say that, like, I've had a mindset shift on this during this discussion myself about just how important Africa is for crypto, because it's the place where this can go out of theory into experimentation, into practice, and actually make a real difference.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a story. I mean, if there was a centralized marketer for crypto, like, this is the story I would run. It's not about, is Bitcoin going to reach 20K again? It's like, what's going on in Africa with this stuff is where it's at. Like, this is, I don't know. I've always heard of, third world countries are places where these things can be used, but after hearing you talk about it, it's just a really compelling story. And I hope we hear more from you soon about, these things coming to fruition. I think we should have you again on a podcast in the future where we can actually talk about like things on the ground that are actually happening.
Definitely. I mean, like, I think the beauty of the focus, and number one, like, I'm glad I did this. I always say, like, my hope and my goal is to just give more context to people who have no idea about sort of like the potential of Africa, or the intersection of, like, Africa and crypto. Because, like, that means, like, if I can become an advocate of that, like, that's number one. Then number two is, like, the work that we're now focused on, from the sort of like the subset of the team at Labs, is actually sort of like, running these experiments and sort of like, going from some early theory to actual use cases. And I'm super excited. I think the next 6 to 12 months, there will be, like, very, very interesting case studies on numerous ideas, and we'll be great to come back and share some of this.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Awesome. Coming on. You got it there.